Question number 8, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Defence and asks, has he read all the Defence Force reports regarding the accident involving an RNZAF Iroquois on ANZAC Day 2010? If so, what action has he taken?
The Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, I have read the report of the Court of Inquiry, the Accident Analysis Report and update reports. I've made it clear to the Air Force that I expect all recommendations of the Court of Inquiry to be implemented. I've ordered an independent inquiry into Air Force progress in implementing those recommendations. As Minister of State Services, I've ordered a further inquiry into how civilian agencies dealt with their responsibilities for investigating the crash and whether this process is fit for purpose.
Iain Lees-Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, does the Accident Analysis Report indicate that the decision not to pre-position aircraft on the day before ANZAC Day was made to avoid accommodation costs of around $600?
The Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, the AAR informs the Court of Inquiry, and the Court of Inquiry is very clear about what the causes of the crash were, and budgetary considerations were not listed as a cause of the ANZAC Day crash.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, my question was about the contents of the Accident Analysis Report, not the Court of Inquiry report. I'd appreciate it if the Minister could answer regarding the content of that report, not another one.
Indeed, the member did ask about that. The Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, what the report says is that the decision not to pre-position an aircraft was not a cause of the accident, regardless of what factors might have informed that decision not to pre-position the aircraft. Whether things like it could be completed within the available crewing rosters, there were also factors that the Air Force was in discussion with Wellington Airport and couldn't fly down there after dark. And so the report was very clear that that budgetary factor was not a cause of the crash.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor.
Mr. Speaker, the question was, has he read the Accident Analysis Report, and if so, does it indicate that the decision not to pre-position aircraft on the day before ANZAC Day was made to avoid accommodation costs of around $600? Sir, I listened very carefully to that answer, and I could not tell whether it was a yes or a no.
The interesting point that's been raised in this point of order was the question didn't ask whether the decision not to position an aircraft the night before, the day before, caused the accident. The question asked whether the decision was made to avoid a certain cost. And then answering, the Minister referred to the elements of the report that described causes of the accident, but didn't actually cover the specific point the member's question focused on, and it was a very straightforward question. I'd ask the Minister to answer that question.
Speaker, well, the question...
Point of order, the Honourable...
Speaker, I'm not going to take time off my colleague who's answering perfectly adequately, but I would ask you to have a look at the Hansard of the answer that he gave, because it would be my contention that he did answer that question by making it very clear that there were, in the decision to not pre-position, there were no factors other than those he mentioned in his answer.
Point of order.
I don't think the House needs to take more time on this. I'll certainly check in case I'm wrong here. If I'm wrong, no harm is done, because the Minister can, if I'm wrong, the Minister can simply point out where I was wrong in his further answer and when I've asked him to answer that particular issue raised in the question, because the question was a very straight question. And if I'm wrong, the Minister is most at liberty to point out that I'm wrong. I've got no problem with that, and that saves a lot of time. The Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Well, there's two parts to the question. To the first part, yes.
Iain Lees-Galloway.
Does the Accident Analysis Report indicate that a decision was made not to pre-position the aircraft in order to avoid accommodation costs of around $600?
The Honourable Dr.
The
Jonathan
report
Coleman.
indicates there are a number of considerations and factors taken into account. That was one of a number, the key point being that was not a cause of the crash. And I urge the member to focus on the cause of the crash rather than try and cause a cheap beat-up out of this.
Question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Minister, is it not a fact that the Air Force Internal Action Analysis says as follows: quotes, the need to minimise accommodation costs incurred by 3 Squadron due to pressure on the accommodation budget was recognised and contributed to the decision, brackets, not to fly the day before, end of brackets, end of quotes, and further, it found there were no instructor manuals or guides because of resourcing issues, and if that's a fact, when is he and the Prime Minister going to apologise to those 3 families for their inhuman cost-cutting exercise in the Air Force?
The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we deal in facts, and what I can say is that the person in charge of the inquiry, this is a direct quote, and it's from the Court of Inquiry, says, when considering the report, I could not help thinking that the genesis of this accident goes back some 10 years when changes to RNZAF command and control.
Point of order, the Right Honourable
Mr. Speaker, I gave him 2 direct quotes from the report, and I asked him to confirm whether they were in fact from the report. Now, why doesn't he answer the question?
The member's question went a little beyond that, and the Minister is, in my view, answering the question in a way he's entitled to. The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
In answer to the member's question, the quote from the person in charge of the inquiry is that, in quotes, when considering the report, I could not help thinking that the genesis of this accident goes back some 10 years when changes to RNZAF command and control were made in an attempt to make operations more efficient and cost effective. So it was under that Labour Party government's watch.
Order. Iain Lees-Galloway, supplementary question.
Is he aware that the operational order for ANZAC Day flypasts ordered that 3 Squadron pre-position aircraft on the day before ANZAC Day in order to mitigate both noise abatement regulations and the risk of poor weather? And does he know why this order was not followed?
The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
Well, the member can't have it both ways. He's trying to make out that it wasn't positioned because of a budgetary factor.
The question was a reasonable question. There's no expectation the Minister would necessarily know the answer to it because it was clearly an operational issue, who gives orders, but it doesn't allow that kind of answer. It was a reasonable question, but the Minister may not in fact have that information. The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
The fact is that the pre-positioning or lack of in regards to those aircraft was not a cause of the accident, and the CII is very clear about that.
Order. I think I can assist. The question simply asked whether the Minister could tell the House who gave is he aware of the alleged order, I must stress, for the aircraft to be pre-positioned the day before? That's all the question's asking, and the Minister may or may not know. But it would not be unreasonable for the Minister to, unless it's not in the public interest, for the Minister to actually answer it. The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
I don't agree with the assertion he's putting to the House, and I'd have to check that fact because, I'm not too certain if he has got his facts correct.
Iain Lees-Galloway, supplementary question.
Is he aware that the accident analysis report also indicates that training manuals for the use of night vision equipment and night flying were not current at the time of the accident because resources had not been allocated to keeping those materials up to date? And does he think that contributed to the accident?
The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
And I refer that member to the Court of Inquiry report, which is informed by the AAR, which lists quite clearly the causes of the accident. Basically, they were around culture, a lack of adherence to the rules, and lack of oversight. It's very clear.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Iain Lees-Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, my questions, all of them have been about the accident analysis report.
Order. I'm on my feet. I've assisted the member with answers where he's got good grounds, but he may recollect the last part of that question asked the Minister whether he thought those matters contributed to the accident. The Minister in his answer covered that issue very clearly. Supplementary question, Iain Lees-Galloway.
When will the Minister take responsibility for the fact that it's his government's policy to cut costs and cut corners that has put pressure on Defence Force personnel and has compromised the safety of those personnel and contributed to the accident that occurred on ANZAC Day 2010?
The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman.
I would just refer to the member to this fact, that Labor spending on pilot training, so Labor government spending, was cut from $66 million in 1999 to $45 million in 2008. There you go.
Point order.
Mr.
Order.
Speaker.
Order. Now, order. Both sides, both National and Labour, will comply with the rules of this House. And when a point of order is called, they'll cease that kind of interjection.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister was asked to account for actions or inactions during his time or his government's time. He cannot rise to his feet and begin with a diatribe about the former government.
Order. The question contained a lot of statement of the members' views as to what had happened. The Minister is absolutely at liberty, when asked that kind of question, to express his views in return. The straightforward questions asked previously, I made sure the Minister answered them. Questions like that last one, though, the Minister's got some licence in his answer. The Honourable Dr. Jonathan Coleman. He's welcome to give further answers.
Oh, yeah, sure. Look, I just refer to my previous quote from that report. The person in charge of the Court of Inquiry says, when considering the report, I could not help thinking that the genesis of this accident goes back some 10 years when Labour were in charge, when changes to RNZAF command and control were made in an attempt to make operations more efficient and cost-effective. So those changes happened on your government's watch. I'm afraid that's the truth.
Question number 9, the Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Energy